Friends and family, welcome to another live broadcast brought to you by Premier's Turning Point, with your host, Bishop Dr. Uton Lane. We pray and hope that something that is being said today will bless your soul and spirit. Please take a quick moment to like and share this broadcast with your friends and family. Thank you again for joining us. Let's go into our live program.
Blessings again, and we're still having some technical difficulties, and I'm sorry about that. So we are joining you this evening. We had plans to discuss with Dr. DeLacy Davis all the plans on hand. We're having some technical difficulties, but we want to pray that God's presence will be with us tonight, that His presence will lead and direct us, and that He will make a way for this discussion to continue. We want you this evening. This is Premier's Turning Point. I'm Bishop Dr. Utom Lang, and we want to still go on with our discussion and try our best to engage and get in touch with what is going on. We are hearing a lot about the police. Defunding the police. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that and what it truly means. And so we wanted to get a better understanding of that this evening. So we are inviting you to chime in with your questions, chime in with any issues that you have. You can go on Facebook Live, you can go on YouTube, and just share with us your thoughts. We're still hoping that we'll have Dr. Davis, but we'll proceed on this evening. So the thing I am also still a little bit confused about what it actually means by defunding the police, and I think I hear different stories. I think I'm kind of getting an understanding, but the one thing we want everybody out there to get a good understanding of what they're talking about. We're dealing with the Black Lives Matters, and we seem like now we're turning to figuring out what is going on and what else can be done to right and to better our society and to have better race relations and to have people, having the love of God in their heart and sharing with one another and, seeing what they can do to help one another versus just trying to, take over and do their own thing. So we want you all this evening to chime in. I say, from my understanding, one of the thoughts is while we're seeing a lot of these killings and stuff, I think the police at times, there's a misunderstanding either between what the person is about, what is going on. One of the common thing is, some of the things that they're dealing with, social worker may be able to deal with it, or counselor would probably better able to engage a person and deal with the issue at hand. So one of the thought that I hear is maybe channeling the funds a little bit differently, whether to training the police better or to have other personnel that will be possibly able to, deal with some of these situations. So, and then of course you would need to channel funds that way. So defunding, I know for most people doesn't necessarily mean closing up all the police departments. I know there's one school of thought that think that may be necessary because of the institutional racism that we have seen over the years, that a restart may be something worthwhile, and a kind of a community policing would be better serve us. So we want to make sure that we understand what is going on, know how to take a stand, know what we should stand for, and what things are important. So that's the topic we wanted to discuss this evening. Of course, if there's anyone having a question or want to send in a comment, please do so. We can deal with that, and then we can go on discussing the issues. I know over the past weeks, we've seen a major shakeup in the country because of the protest and things that have now brought a lot of things to the forefront. And one of the issue that is brought to the forefront, and I know the protesters and the various groups are calling to a better look and a new look at, how the police function, what they're trained to do, what are they doing? Are they doing some stuff that they're probably not trained to do? And there's all of those issues that I think need us further discussion and clarification so that we can get a better handle on what is going on. And it's going to be important that all of us, citizens, whether we're, and especially those of us in church are a part of the kingdom of God, to be aware of what is going on, to be aware of, ways that we could then potentially, help the whole situation to either calm it down or to be a voice of reason or to, put forth ideas that is going to help to restructure and, reshape, these interactions that have become somewhat problematic. And this is kind of where we stand right now as the people of God. I think we do have a responsibility to be responsible citizens, to be responsible in what I mean, being involved with what is going on, understand, and to share the love of God in these various situations and circumstances. Because as I have contended to say in the past and to go forward, if the love of God is ruling in the hearts of the people, and from the churches and everybody around, then we're going to see a lot less issues that we're faced with. We're going to have a lot less problems that is all around because, we're going to be guided by love. All right. And we're going to be guided by the truth of what is going on. So you need to be assured where you stand, who you stand with, how you're standing, and making sure you're being guided by the principles of the Word of God. And if we're guided by those principles, you're going to see a major transformation and a major turnaround. And we know that people right now, one of the crossroads that we're at is dealing with the situation with the police and the various citizens that we have around. And one of the issues I think that I've heard people brought up is when we think of it, some of the people who become policemen, some of them already, have preconceived notions and prejudices that we see that are against, people of minorities and people of various races. And so that's, I think, one of the issue that needs to be dealt with. The people who we are bringing into the police force, we need a better vetting and, better profiles, mental, spiritual, every kind of profile, so that we have a good idea, what it is that they're about. And then we will have less people, hopefully, coming with the preconceived notions and having, when looking down on minorities and people of color. We will have people coming in who are valuing the life of every person, who puts value upon every person's life, where they then treat each person as a human. And then we can go back to the scriptures where we actually treat others more better than ourselves. They are at least how we would want to be treated. And if that mentality is ruling, then we see how there will be a difference. So, one of the things I think when they're talking about defunding the police, I think one of the things is maybe putting some more those funds to rechannel it into training, into helping people deal with, helping the people who are putting in the police force have a better understanding of the human race. And we definitely, someone is putting forward, need change in the various departments. And we know that not all policemen are bad, but the few, I mean, they tell us one bad apple is going to, spoil the whole bunch. And it then causes a bad taste that people are then dealing with and trying to figure out how they're going to best, are they going to best deal with the situation that we have. While if we could do some retraining, or we can do some pre-training before they actually become a part of the system, then hopefully we'll have a better relation, because people will be dealing people on a love relationship. We'll deal with people on a human relationship, dealing with each other, each other as a child of God, each other as a human being, and we should then hopefully be able to weed out those who are just want to go into the force for various reasons, and really get those who want to go there to protect and to really serve their community. And I think this is kind of what we have to get to. This is one of the issues that we are facing with, that is bothering us on a daily basis. But we're going to have to see some major changes, for us to then, understand what is going on. And so we want all of us that are, have, a voice to start to put it forward. We need to deal with these situations in basically every aspect of life, every aspect of our community, no matter who we are, what we're, dealing with. We need to find, it in us to, when we see things are not going right, to point it out and try to help to better the situation. So, for example, right now, one of the things that we see that is not going the way we would like it is the situations that we're in. And we right now faced with the policing, and not everyone, as we said before, but a group there that are there for ulterior motives. They're there to do something different, and we find that we need to make a difference, and we need to have changes. We're gonna have to see changes. Hallelujah, hallelujah. We just want to share, all that we're doing, and letting the world know, and bring this to a level of consciousness where people understand what is going on. And as Christians and as the people of God, we need a good understanding of what is going on. We need a good understanding of the world, and know that the world that we're in and what is going on. We don't need to be the Lone Rangers in any way, shape, or form, but we need to come together and bring all this to the forefront where people understand what is going on and they know what is going on in the world, and they can then be able to better deal with it and share. So one of the things that I think we need is better policies in place for also the police people who are good. We need a better way to support them, because I know one of the other issues, if you are, and I've read quite a bit about this, if you're a policeman, for example, and you see something going wrong and you speak out, a lot of times you're treated badly, either by the forces, the other people in the force, the union, and this is really a major issue, because then that also deters the good policemen from coming forward, because they know if they come, they're going to be ostracized, they're going to be shunned, they're going to be left by themselves, and basically, in essence, the career is almost over. And this is one of the major issues that we see. And we need to make sure we know what is going on. And I think we are probably have our guests on at this time. I don't know if you can hear me, Doctor. Okay.
I hear you,
Can you hear
sir.
me? Good. So we have
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
DeLacy Davis, right? And he
Yes,
has a
sir.
lot of insight for us. I've been talking a little bit about, these things that we're faced with and what reforms we probably need in the police system for sure. And then I want you to help us, though, firstly, to get an understanding. And then first, I want you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself. And then also, the big question that we hear is this defunding the police. And so we want to kind of dive into it. So we're going to open up to you right now, sir.
Sure, Bishop. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity, and certainly your technical team for getting us pulled together, because we've been trying to
Hmm.
pull it together. Um,
Yes.
I live in Newark, New Jersey. I'm a retired police sergeant, 20 years, East Orange, New Jersey. My last assignment was Community Services Unit, where I managed 33 community-based programs, the Police Athletic League, growing it from 150 young people to 2,600 young people, reducing crime by 33%, raising $1.3 million. I spent 5 years as a school principal in Newark, and I currently am the executive director for the Family Support Organization of Union County, where we provide support services to parents of children with special needs. All of my staff have special needs children, including myself. And I'm also the executive director for the New Jersey Alliance of Family Support Organizations, where we provide support services to all 15 family support organizations in the state of New Jersey, training their staff, certify them, as well as providing technical assistance. And most recently, I finished my doctoral research entitled Police Use of Force, examining the factors relating to police officers shooting unarmed Black males. And so that's been my work. It's been my life's work. I'm the founder of Black Cops Against Police Brutality. And here I am. And so I started Black Cops Against Police Brutality in 1991. And now, 29 years later, people are asking me what I think about where we are, and how is it that 29 years ago I was raising these flags while on the police force, and now the country's just catching up.
So you've really been in the trenches and been around and understand even what we're going through right now.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah. So now, let me then probably ask you, just so maybe we'll probably do the main topic first, and then everything will fall out of that. Now, what is your understanding of defunding the police? Because I'm trying to get a good understanding of that.
So defunding police means different things to different people. So
Hmm.
for the people, so the extreme of defund the police is to dismantle it, to shut down the budget, and for there not to be a police force in a community. That's one perspective. However, there are other perspectives, which is what I'm more inclined to agree with, which is actually divest and reallocate some resources in the police budget to deal with social issues and social service programming, like homelessness, like mental health challenges, like drug addiction, substance abuse challenges, like creating economic opportunity for residents in the community, as and supporting social workers, as opposed to using millions and billions of dollars for police officers who bring violence to the situation.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of my understanding. I know there's one group who is all the way just restart, just get rid of everything and restart. But I think I was saying that earlier before you came on is I think getting the proper training and then divesting, you're right, and moving some of those services and to get the other services, up to speed, social work and all of that stuff to support, the community. And then of course all the things that then lead to to crime and stuff, homelessness, making sure everybody, drug addiction and dealing with those situations. You're right, I think that's going to go a much further way in restarting our communities.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we're talking about, and some people that are talking about defunding, we're talking about what causes crime, what leads a person in that direction. And so police officers, interestingly enough, there are two professions in which you determine whether a person lives or dies. One is doctors, and they have a mantra, do no harm, and the other is police. In a split second, we can use deadly force and it can be justifiable. So we determine whether or not a person lives or dies. And so I don't take that lightly. And I heard you talk about God earlier. Certainly, only I believe God makes that determination. And so when police officers are vested with that kind of power in a community, one, it's godly power. And therefore, you have to be very particular about how you use it and when you're using it.
hmm Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I actually, and you can enlighten me a little bit, but one of my thought was, for example, if you have a person that, is running away from you, is it possibly you could shoot them in their leg and
So
not,
you sound like my mother years ago when she was living. I'm a
yeah,
firearms instructor. And so she said, why
yeah,
can't you just shoot the gun out their hands?
yeah.
And so
hmm
I want to be very clear that it is called deadly force for a reason. Because when you
hmm
employ deadly force, there is a high likelihood that you will either kill someone or cause severe damage to that person. And when you're taught to use a firearm, you're taught to shoot at the largest part of the body so that it hits a main organ and it stops the action against you or a third party. You're only supposed to use deadly force when your life or the life of another person is in jeopardy, period. And in terms of someone running away from you, even in the wild, wild west, it wasn't cool to shoot a man in the back. And
hmm
so there's something to be said about a person running away from you and you shoot them anyway. That's problematic.
hmm Yeah, that's right. Hmm And
That's
I
about a
couldn't
depravity
understand
for
that.
life. It's
Hmm
problem because what happens is, so black people are roughly 13% of the country's population, and in some instances with 30-40% of the people being shot, armed and unarmed, whereas whites are, and in this country they shoot about 1,000 people, the police shoot about 1,000 people a year. Whites are about 45% of that 1,000, but they represent, whites are 60% of the population. So disproportionately black people are being shot by the police, and that becomes a problem. And so law enforcement has to look at itself. There's no question in my mind that there is systemic racism. And interestingly enough, the current occupant at 1600 Black Lives Matter Plaza down in DC, doesn't
hmm
he nor his cabinet recognize or admit that there is systemic racism. And so if we can't agree to what the problem is, we absolutely cannot agree on the solution to the problem. Can you imagine going to the doctor with a stomach ache and they tell you it's coming from your tooth? Can you imagine
hmm
going to the dentist with a toothache and he tells you it's coming from your feet? So if we don't get the diagnosis right, we're not going to get the solution right. And that's what's going on now. There are those in this country who would rather forget everything that's been done. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talks about this in the ISIS papers, The Keys to the Colors. She talks about the institutions in this country that are inherently based on white supremacy. And that is economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And across all of those spectrums, you see white supremacy. And if we don't address that, what she says is that we have to either go into these institutions, reform them, or tear them down and rebuild them, which is what you hear some people saying around defund the police. It is about, and you said it earlier, reimagining what policing looks like in the community. What does that
hmm
look like? How do we want to be policed? Why is it that they police differently in a suburban community than they do in urban and poor communities? How does that happen? I argue because it is the inherent look at brown people who have been criminalized, black and brown people, by law enforcement. And therefore, there is some in law enforcement who believe that they can treat black and brown people differently than everyone else.
Yeah, yep. And I know one of my comments online was, we're talking about the police, but I think you brought a good point out. The person saying this should be, we need change across the board, in every area, in the political area, all of the areas. I mean, and actually, I'm a family doctor, so I understand what you're talking about the diagnosis. You can't treat something if you don't look and find the root cause.
That's
All
right.
you're going to be doing is then covering it up. It's like
That's
it's
right.
kind of like with pain. Nobody think they should have an ounce of pain. But my thing is, well, what's causing the pain? And
That's
then we
right.
can then better figure out how to deal with it. And I think,
Yeah.
as the person online was saying, we really need to look across the whole system. And we need to go back, even the university systems, it's all
Yes.
based on white supremacy. And what are we
Yes.
teaching people, even in the history books? The history books are written in ways that going to downplay all of the things that the African American had gone through, and so we're seeing a
That's
lot
right.
of it's really on an institutional level that all these problems are, and that's why a quick fix, and that's was one of my thoughts is just retraining the police. That's not going to fix the problem. you know
No. No.
hmm
So
hmm
I say to people when I hear people talk about training, I mean training is helpful when there's no training, but what happens when
hmm
there's all sorts of training, like New York City Police Department, NYPD, Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, they were on the cutting edge, and it was all sorts of training. But in New York City, they had stop, question, and frisk, in which disproportionately 85% of black and brown people being stopped, and they weren't committing any crimes. We
hmm
saw similar
hmm
kinds of practice when Norris went from NYPD and became the police director down in Baltimore, Maryland. And so disproportionately again, we saw stop, question, and frisk, and black and brown people. 29,000 people were stopped who had committed no crime. And at that time, Patricia Jessamy, who was the state's attorney, dropped charges against all of those people. So those are major concerns that we should be looking at.
Yep, definitely. And now, if looking back historically a little bit, now there's some of talk is that policing was really start out of chasing slaves, and that's where this
Yes.
whole policing thing came from.
So you have policing that starts somewhere around the 1800s or earlier than the 1800s. You saw them as slave catchers in the South. So they were slave patrols and slave catchers in the South, and that's how the South started with the policing. The North was slightly different, but there were still slaves up in the North. And so you begin to see policing formalized based on Sir Robert Peel's model of policing at the Metropolitan Police in London, England, 1829. And so they used Sir Robert Peel and his Peelian approach to policing, and then we had the night watch initially. So they were making sure that the communities were safe, that slaves were not escaping, and free black people could be watched. And then it formalized. But in Louisiana is where you see the first black police officers, somewhere around 1805, as the guard, and they even then could not wear uniforms around white people. They could not arrest white people. They couldn't do any of those things that they could do to black people, to white people. So we begin to see the white supremacy very early on. And in Philadelphia, you figure around 1913, you see the first black police officers there. And Mr. Forgy was one of the first. And even with him, he could only wear his uniform in parades. He couldn't wear it around white people. And as late as 1949 in Atlanta, Georgia, the oath and obligation that the first 8 black police officers had to take was, I would say something like, I, DeLacy Davis, being an in police officer, do solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution. So
hmm
when you're talking about, we're only talking about 70 years ago that even the police officer had to refer to themselves as the N-word. And so that is baked in to policing in this country. You're right. So if the foundation is slave catching, and we're looking at ourselves 70, 80, 90, 100 years later, and we're not doing anything any different now than we did then clearly the structure has a flaw in it.
hmm Yeah, and I think that's what, as much as we are protesting for particular things, I think we really need to look at the whole picture and really start. And that's one point. I think last week's program, we talked a little bit about we have to get more involved. And I'm talking all of us
Yes.
at every level, especially start at the local level. And we got to work our way in because the decisions are being made. People are coming up with ideas, but we're not there, and it's kind
No.
of we're kind of left out. Yep, yep.
We're a long ways from there. So I
hmm
talk about some solutions, and I certainly want to, I don't know how long we're going, but
Good.
I want to at least
No,
give you
no, keep
some of
yeah.
that,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Start the
So
solutions. Yeah.
So at the federal level, we talk about trauma-informed policing. And you as a medical doctor know that trauma-informed is a big buzzword now in the medical field and the social and the
Mhm.
behavioral health field, but we're not talking
Yes.
about trauma-informed policing, where police officers coming to this encounter, to this experience, to this engagement with the community, understanding that you have potentially been traumatized. And therefore, I must function differently as I engage you. We need to look at pattern and practice investigations. So, consent decrees. The first thing that Jeff Sessions did when he came in as the U.S. Attorney General was he stopped pursuing consent decrees on police departments. Well, if you don't compel people to do the right thing, they don't just do the right thing naturally because it's the right thing to do. Heck, our children wouldn't do the right thing if there wasn't a consequence for their misbehavior. Additionally, at the federal level, we have to address qualified immunity. That is the protection in the law that prevents officers from being sued or held accountable for their behavior as police officers in some instances. Additionally, we have to ban the chokehold. I know that legislation has come down from the feds around um, incentivizing not using the chokehold. But when do you incentivize someone to not kill somebody? At the end of the day, what they've said is, well, if you want federal grants for the police department, then you have to have a use of force policy that bans the chokehold. Well, what happens if I don't need federal grants because I'm an affluent community, so I can still choke someone to death? And then finally, when we talk about defunding the police, we think it should be divested, reallocate the funds of some of the police departments, and elected officials have to reject union money, because if you're taking the money from the union, then you're also doing the bidding for the police unions.
Now, again, that's you brought up a good point because that's one of the things that I'm always battling with. Why do we need a police union?
Well, the police union, I mean, and I don't want to give a whole history on labor, but unions were there to protect the workers, and that makes
hmm
sense when you're in environments where if we could think in terms of, and I used to be a union official, I used to be a PBA president and vice president. So my job, it was to protect my workers, and so also to negotiate contracts, and also to extract from the city as many things as I could get for my workers in exchange for me being in that position as a negotiator. So that makes sense. And when I talk to our community, when they talk about the unions, they're like, well, the union never ever comes out against the police officer. I said, well, that makes sense because they're taking that police officer's dues. And the dues is so that they'll protect me. I think the mistake that we make, and you talked about being involved so that we can be informed and educated. While the unions are tax exempt organizations under the federal code, they're 501c4, which means that the bulk of what they do is for their membership. We're used to nonprofits being groups like the Red Cross and the NAACP, which are 501c3s, which means the bulk of the work that you do is for the community. There's a
Yes.
difference. And so, what unions are doing is what they were structured to do, protecting their membership. Do we think it's right? Not at all, but we understand that that's the job that they're hired to do. So, since we can't stop the union from doing its job, and it's very difficult to fight the union for police officers' behavior, then what you can do is force politicians to give back union money so that they're not putting forth policies that are friendly to the union and hostile to the community and the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think I'm glad you clarified that for me because I think that was not the clearest, and I think it makes sense, right? If you're paid to advocate for somebody, of course that's your job. That's kind of like when you get a lawyer.
That's right.
It does not matter if you're innocent or guilty. It's a matter of what's the best job I can do for you, right?
That's
So
right.
I
That's
now see
right.
why the union, but you're right is that I think the politics have kind of pushed it way into everything. And so, therefore, if of course you have politicians taking money, then they are going to beneficially want to do laws to benefit the union. I mean, and I see
Absolutely.
that actually. And actually, one of the things that I think may help us overall, even in just reforming everything, is what do you think about term limits for senators and congressmen?
Well, I think that there's some people that I wish we could have held on to for a lifetime, and Other folks we need to get rid of sooner than the term limit, right? So we
Hmm.
could have kept
Yep.
President Barack Obama. There's some things that I think that he did well, and if I could get rid of some people right away, we would have. I
Hmm.
think at the end of the day, part of it is about being fully engaged. All politics is local. And so at the local level is where the rubber meets the road. And so we have to be engaged at the council level. We have to be engaged at the mayoral level, the freeholder, the county government level, the state representatives, the legislators there. And then we get to senators and congressmen because they're the ones that bring that bacon home to the local level that sometimes gets to the community and other times does not, depending upon our activism and our engagement in the political process.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you make because as I was speaking with somebody this week, if we have for example, a congressman, and even if he's older, if he is in tune with the people, and the people are bringing forward their ideas, telling him what's not right, what's not so good, you're gonna probably get the better results. But I think that's where I think we, and especially for me and the people of God, we have to interject ourselves into every decision and everything that is made. And I think somehow some of us have to run for office, locally, move it on up. But wherever we are, we have to make sure that we're staying involved and we're staying engaged with what is going on. We may have run into a little more difficulty and lost our guests, but we'll keep moving. Hopefully, we're getting back. But we had some very good points that were made and I think we goes back to even last week, when we talk about doing any kind of reform, any kind of restructuring, defunding the police, or whichever way we want to go. I think it's going to start with every one of us getting involved with what's going on. I mean, one of my little pet peeves is, the church could have such a big impact, but you know what? There's too much
Wow.
splintering. There's too much. Everybody's just in their little corner. But I mean, this is the time, for us to get together. I don't know if you want to chime in on that, Danny.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, right? So
Yeah.
the black church particularly deposits one of the largest amounts of money in the country on Monday after Sunday. And that kind of power, just the economic power collectively, regardless of denomination, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, or other, if we are simply using our political power, our economic power to make demand on elected officials, if we're denying them access to our pulpits just around election time and every 4 years, no, you've got to give us more than that. You've got to give us something. There's something to be said about policing in the earlier days, 1920s in New York and Tammany Hall and the political process there. In fact, police departments and police officers were controlled by the political bosses. The political
Hmm.
bosses in an area determined who was going to make captain, who was going to be the chief, and how you were going to be advanced. And that is how they began to formalize because they realized that the political influence was horrible on the outcome for the average citizen relative to the police. And so if our brothers and sisters of God, however they're called, however they're engaged, could simply put their personalities and I think, and I'm going to say this at the risk of offending some people. I don't mean it, to offend anyone, but I need to say it. If all we're giving the people is a prosperity gospel, and the masses of the people are poor and suffering, then that is insufficient to move us along collectively, and it does not help our condition when we're talking about corrupt police, criminal police behavior, or elected officials that are not responding to the needs of the people.
I mean, that's so right. I mean, and being a pastor, I really totally agree because, if you're telling somebody that you're going to prosper and be da da da, and you go on day to day and they see that not happen, then guess what? They're also a little silly because this person is telling me this, it's not happening. And I think
That's right.
we need to reach out to people where they are, help them, show them,
That's,
give them, teach them how to fish, show them what to
that's
do.
right.
Just to just say, okay, you pray and everything's going to be fine. It's not going to be. You need to now get up off of your duff, and here's how I can help you and direct you. And I think for anything to change, we have to get down to that level. And then, I mean,
Yes.
you're right. Yes, some of you are going to prosper. And of course, if you're telling me prosper, you're prospering and I'm not, then something is wrong.
That's
So
right.
there has to be a change. Okay. Hmm.
That's right.
Hmm.
I agree with you.
Hmm.
I just think it's so important because our community is under siege. And I grew up as a young person. I was born in the 60s. And so I was born inside of that revolution. I was born in 62. But I knew that the place where we had the most power, as it's always been, has been the Black church. It has been the place where we could seek refuge. It's been the place where we could find our voice. It was the place where we could sing and do the work. And we were being led by courageous people of the cloth doing the work. What has happened is that, as you said, people are in silos now, and people are worried about their fiefdoms and how big a church may be, congregation may be. And some of my friends who are of the cloth, these are the debates I have with them all the time. I says, if in
Hmm.
fact the congregation is starving, what good are you? If the people are
Yep.
naked, how good have you been? If the only person driving a nice car with heat in the car and in the house is you and the first lady, who are you serving? We have got to do this work. Even in this work that I do with Black Cops Against Police Brutality, and I run my agency, I believe in servant leadership. That is my leadership style. And I believe that if you're not willing to serve the people, you're not qualified to lead the people. It is
Hmm.
absolutely a contradiction of terms.
Yeah, and that's actually the word. That's in the word. You got to be first a servant to be able to then lead. And I think I'm really hoping that as we go through the next few months, we'll see some restructuring, even from the church level, restructuring in the community, and we'll see everybody being empowered now to go and to get something done. Because I think, even we could have all these protests, but if nothing is done and we don't get up and do something, then what would it be for?
Within 500 feet of our churches, there's usually a liquor store.
Hmm.
Within
Yep.
500 feet. So if we took some basic steps by simply saying the men of the church are going to go out to the corner every day of the week to make sure that we're safe right in this space. I live in a
Hmm.
neighborhood where they sell drugs on every corner except the four corners where I own a house. And they've been off that
Hmm.
corner for the last 15 years. And I simply went to the corner and talked to the brothers. Brothers, y'all can't sell here. I live here, my family is here, and I need these four corners. Now they sell at the next four, and I was doing a lecture at a hospital last week, and so the hospital's about 5 blocks away. So I walked in my suit and tie with my folder to go do a presentation on this George Floyd case. And as I walked and approached the drug dealers on the corner, I walked through the group and said, "Good morning, brothers." And one brother said, "Hey, Brother DeLacy, where you going? Dressed up, walking in a suit." Told him what I was going to do. "Well, if you need us to come protest, we're there, brother, because we respect the work you do in the community." And my point is, they're drug dealers. And I'm a retired police officer. But there's a mutual respect in the community because when I come to the corner, they clear the corner because they're not going to sell in front of me. And I'm not going to watch them sell. But I'm also going to treat them with the level of respect that I want. And so we have the capacity to do that. There are some churches doing great work around this country, some mosques doing great work around the country, where you just got to go out and engage the community at the lowest level, as you just said. We got to engage people, talk to them, and see what can we do for them.
Hmm. I think that's so important. And I think if we go back to the basics of the Bible, that's what will kind of trigger us to get in that pattern. I mean, it's funny when I go into the hospital, I will say I'm going, I run for an hour. It'll be 3, 4 hours later because I stopped and I talked to everybody, no matter what their position or what their plight in life. And I was there trying to, see how can I help this person? How can I, boost them up? And I think if we get back to that mentality and we see that kind of mentality in the policing, it will be a major change. If we have a love mentality, a caring for each other mentality, and trying to regroup. And again, I'm not going to let the church get away, though. They need to go back to doing what is necessary to reach out, and to get involved in the community. So I really think that's
Absolutely.
an important thing. Yep. All right.
I agree
Now,
with you. I agree with you.
go ahead. Go ahead. Now,
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Bishop.
any other pointers you had? I don't want to make sure we
Oh,
got all your points.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So at
Go
the
ahead.
state level, I think that there needs to be a special prosecutor who only investigates police officers that are using force and deadly force, right? So where there's complaints of the use of force, abuse of the force, or shootings, there should be a special prosecutor. Why? Because as the late attorney Johnny Cochran used to say, that there's an unholy alliance between the police department and the prosecutor's office or the district attorney's office. Why? Because the district attorney needs police officers to make the case against the public and to move their career forward. So if I'm going to turn around and prosecute a police officer who I need in the future, but I'm prosecuting them or their colleague today for use of force, they're not going to help me with my cases in the future. So you need a prosecutor that only deals with that. Additionally, you have to change the standards for deadly force and how it's used. So in California, they're attempting to move the standard from a reasonable force to necessary force. Now that still has to be fleshed out in terms of a definition, but at the end of the day, currently, if I reasonably believe that you're a threat to my life, then that's the argument that I get to use, even if the person on the outside doesn't think the force is reasonable. And then finally, people are looking at New Jersey using a licensure procedure for police officers like they do in other parts of the country, where you need a license to become a police officer. And if you're accused and found guilty of excessive force or abuse of your authority, you lose your license, and therefore you can't go to another police department and get hired. And then finally, at the local level, we're talking about civilian oversight, whether it's a police director and or civilian review board that also has subpoena power and investigative powers. Additionally, reducing the police department's funds for social service functions like mental health, like homelessness, rehabilitation for drug addiction, as well as domestic violence. That's important. That's a critical component. And then we need evidence-based strategies to address some of these concerns in our community. We need to reduce the reliance on police departments to do all these social service functions. And we can also utilize violence interrupters like we have in Newark, where we have people that are on the street who interrupt the violence, being the word that maybe this group is going to fight that group. And so they go have a conversation with each group. That was a part of our African tradition many years ago, where there was a council of elders who would then reconcile whatever the differences are between two parties, and you accepted the decision of the council of elders. That's just some of my recommendations at the federal, state, and local level.
Amen. And I think those are very important ones, because I think we're gonna still be here going round and round unless we address address the issues. I did have one question for you on line. One person asks, "Do you believe that Caucasian police officers are willing to participate or contribute to building the communities that they serve, and if so, what percent?"
Wow, that's an interesting, big, loaded question. So I'm going
Yep.
to say this. I believe that there are Caucasian officers that are interested in building the communities that they serve. And I believe that there's Black and brown officers who are uninterested in building the communities that gave birth to them and communities that they serve. So I say that to say this, and we talked about love. There's no question that racism plays a major role from my point of view and my experience in law enforcement across the country, especially if it comes out of slavery, out of slave patrols. I also believe that there's goodness in everyone. And so at the end of the day, I would be guessing to give anyone a percentage of what I think in terms of those white officers that would invest. But I would also say that the community would be shocked to see the percentage of Black and brown officers who want no parts of the community.
Hmm.
None. And so I need us to not get caught up in the notion of, well, the white folks are racist and the Black and brown folks are not. No, what they need to understand that the culture of law enforcement is white male dominated, racist, sexist, homophobic, and then we get to good cops. But the good cops come in many colors, shapes, sizes, and forms. The problem is institutional in that what gets rewarded gets done. And so if you reward me for bad behavior, I will continue to act badly, just like any child. And if you reward good behavior and you have incentives to move me toward good behavior, then I will move in that direction. I believe wholeheartedly that white officers, like every other officer, let me put it this way. How many times and how many cases can you think of where a Black or brown officer shot an unarmed white person? I'll wait. I'll wait. How about how many times can you name 5 cases of a Black or brown officer shooting an armed white person? Now, I know of cases because I study it, But I'm going to tell you, I've seen many cases where white guys walking down the street with the gun and they still talk to them. In fact, in my research, that was one of the scenarios. I had a white female with a gun who shot her ex-husband while holding the baby, and cops took anywhere from 2, 3 to almost 10 seconds, even after she shot someone. Because in our minds as black officers, we recognize that we'll never get away with shooting Susie, Karen, Tom, Boy, or Joey, armed or unarmed, as they get away with shooting us unarmed. Because it's a mindset. And so I believe that there is a percentage of white officers and officers of every race who are committed to the communities that they come into, who are invested in the communities. I think the larger issue is there's no question in my mind that my white counterparts are scared of black people. Now, not all of them, but the ones that are having problems are scared. And they're behaving like scared people. When a guy's running away from you and you shoot him in the back, that's a problem. Because he's not a threat to you. In fact, you had his car. The only issue is he's a drunk driver. I had, early in my career, I got a call to go to the corner of the main street in East Orange, and there was a car there at the light, and the guy was asleep. He had his foot on the brake. Turned out he happened to be a pastor in the community whom I did not know, but I was able to reach into the car, turn the car off, put the car in park, get his wallet. That's how I knew he was a pastor, and he lived 3 blocks from where he was. I called for a backup, put him in the back of one car, parked his car, locked his car, put him in my car, drove him home, gave his wife the keys. My supervisor later that evening said, "Why didn't you lock him up?" I said, "No one was damaged. No property was damaged. Nothing was harmed. And he lives in this community. Why do I have to criminalize him?"
Yep.
That's
And I
community
think that's,
policing.
yeah, and that's the difference. And I think, when your heart is right, though, and you have that sense of this is another person, it makes a big difference in how you're going to deal. And I think you could see that. And that's why you're right. There's very good Caucasian cops, and there are also some bad black cops, because what you find is people are people. And sin, actually, one of my favorite things, sin is sin, no matter if it's
Yes.
white, black, yellow, or whatever. And then we'll find that until we root all of that out and get to the back again to the source of what the problem is, we're not gonna get anywhere. And that's why I think we need to have these conversations. We need to open up. We need to share so that people can get a better understanding of what's going on. Because you're gonna find it wherever you go. And that's why one person online said the white person got shot at a church years ago, and they remember he showed up the church, and what they do, they escorted him out calmly and took him to Burger King for a meal.
Yes.
So that's
Or
what
Dylan.
happened in that too. Yeah.
That's right. That's Dylan. He shot 9 black people praying in church, and after they got him, they didn't kill him. They put him in the car and they took him to Burger King or somewhere to get him a meal and a shake.
Yeah.
And then they took
Yep.
him in.
Yep.
And that's the mindset, right? That's the
Yes.
attitude. And
Yep.
and that's, I believe, the disregard for our lives.
Yep. And I think that's why we need to change the history books even. We need to teach people that these people were oppressed, and here's what happened. Now look at them; they're a person just like you, and how are we going to move forward? And I think
Well, we
it's
need to teach the truth. We need to
yes,
teach the
exactly,
truth. And if you're in New Jersey,
exactly.
we simply need to adhere to the law, the Amistad Commission, the Amistad Bill, which requires you to teach the slave experience and the African American experiences in this country. It is not done wholesale. The Jewish experience is taught, but not the African experience in America. Not the, I say, so one of my adopted children is Jamaican. And so I met her on the police force. My mother and I adopted 4 children while working on the police force as a single dad. And so they're all walks of life. But the important piece, and I talked about our being Jamaican, because we don't learn anything about our experience with our brothers and sisters in Jamaica in the school systems here. We didn't learn anything about Granny Nanny and Nanny Town, the Leeward and Wayward Maroons. We didn't learn any of that. I had to learn that on my own to understand when I'd go to Jamaica and see how the Maroons lived up into the mountains, and they refused to be oppressed, and they'd come down and raid the slave catchers and raid the settlers and tell them, and then take all their goods, resources, and go back up into the mountains. That is a rich history of our people that we do not have.
Yes, I'm actually Jamaican. You didn't realize that, but
Yes, yes.
yeah, Yeah, so I know that, and that's the thing is, we need to, history is there for a purpose, a reason. My thing is to enlighten us. Can we see what happened, the truth? You're right. That's an important thing. Now, for example, then, what could we do to make sure that the Amistad thing is carried out in all the schools? How can we do that?
So So that's a great point. So one of the things we
Yeah.
could do is that we could simply decide in each of the communities that we are in that we have a team that comes from any organization, the church, whatever organization, that's a part of making sure that they're practicing implementing the Amistad Bill and that they're
Mm,
teaching the history accurately and look at the textbooks that they're using to teach the history and be able to see how the lessons are being taught. What do the lesson plans look like? And is this district upholding their responsibility to our community, to our children, and to the law? That's an
mhm.
easy thing we could do because that in and of itself begins to change people's minds, right? When they get to hear about
Yes.
Cujo and Coffee and Granny Nanny, right? And so that we wouldn't have these wars that we see between African American children and Jamaican children in the same community, not understanding that they're brothers, sisters, and cousins because somehow, because you have an accent, I think you're somehow different than me. All it means is that we all started on the same slave ship. You just had a cheaper ticket than me and you got off in Jamaica and I continued on to North America.
Yep. And I think that's also right. And I think that's one of the things, if the churches could get together, that's something I think they could, especially in New Jersey at least, we could get together, and that's something we could form a group that goes around to every school district, and and make sure. And actually, we need some of us getting on the school boards as well, so we can know
Yes.
what is going on. Yeah. Yep.
That's
hmm
right. You've got to be a decision maker and a decider. I'm an advisor on the board for the Maplewood South Orange Black Parents Workshop. And so we're all from different communities making sure that we're there to support and to advise the brothers and sisters that are leading that organization on behalf of our children. There are no
Yeah.
borders. We need to be committed to doing this work wherever we may be.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, because we can talk about defunding the police all we want, but unless we change things at this institutional level, and all I get,
Yes.
get the handle of this institutional racism that is all in every part of the system, as you mentioned, then we're still going to be back at square one. You know. hmm
Exactly. Like for
hmm
example, they have school resource officers. I'm not a proponent of officers in the schools unless they're officers that like children. And the reason is because what you're now doing is bringing our children that much closer to the criminal justice system. Now, it's one thing if you're
Yes.
in the school and you're not making arrests, but if you're going to lock me up and criminalize behavior that is typical, when you went to school, they fought in school. When I went to school, they fought in school, but they never called the police on you for a fight in school. You got suspended. Your parents were called. You got suspended for a couple of days. You came back. You shook hands and you made up. Now you have a fight in school, and the school resource officer locks you up, and you have a criminal history.
Yep. Yep.
That's problematic.
Yes.
And it further creates these disparities. We didn't even get to the healthcare disparities, but the disparities in our community where our children can't compete because now that I got a criminal record, I also can't get certain jobs. I got a criminal
Exactly.
history, and if I go to college, I can't do a certain internship. If I can't get an internship because I got a criminal history, then I can't become a social worker. I can't become a school teacher. There's all sorts of jobs that are now no longer
Yep.
acceptable to me, and they're good paying working class jobs.
Exactly, exactly, and of course that way will keep us down, because if we can,
Absolutely.
rise up, it's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
All right, all right. I'm gonna ask you for any. I don't see any other questions just right now, so you can kind of sum up a little bit, and then just in case any other question, we'll answer those. I'm gonna give you a couple minutes. Yeah. Mhm.
Sure. I just thank God for the opportunity to spend this time with you. I think that our community is under siege. I think that Black people are under siege. And I think all people of goodwill need to come together this time to reimagine what America is going to look like. That we certainly will be ripped apart if we don't come together and do what needs to be done. One of the solutions that I offer to people is to listen, learn, and love. Listen to opposing views, especially people that don't think the way you think. learn from all of the opportunities that we get, and love the process of being able to communicate with each other. Set up such sessions where we can chew and chat. We can just go to lunch and have a discussion with people that you ordinarily would not go to lunch with. And also, we need to create healing circles in our community where we can heal, where men can come together and talk. We will have a talking stick and pass it around, and whoever has the stick gets a chance to talk. And ultimately, we need to create safe spaces where we can decompress from this thing that is killing us, because stress and anxiety leads to depression and all sorts of other adverse things, as well as health disparities in and around our community. And that, as we know, stress is the silent killer in our community.
Oh, you're so right. Actually, we dealt with whole stress in a church about a few months ago, and just to show you all the things and the effects that it has, on your body, and then of course the community,
Yes.
and it's amazing. And so, if we can help people to live together, in harmony and in love, we're gonna go a long, long, long way. We're gonna see our communities just grow and flourish. And this is one of my prayer and dream and goal, to do whatever I can, to bring us together,
Yes.
because I think that is
Yes,
the
sir.
problem. That is where it is. And I think I really appreciate you coming on, and sorry for the technical difficulties, but we
No
did get
problem.
you on to say your piece, and I'm sure we'll call on you in the future. I mean, I'm trying to
Yes.
get a little bit more of a round table so we can have some more discussions, because I'm going to take a stand for the church and make sure that the church is, represented, because I think we have such a great role to play. One last thing, do you think the whole code of brotherhood, actually I meant to ask you before, across the police officers is okay? And does it infringe on the police officers speaking out, against them?
Which code did you say?
They said they asked of the brotherhood code across the police department.
I think they mean the code of silence.
Yes, that's probably what they're hinting
Yes.
at. Yeah.
Yes, the code of silence. It absolutely precludes police officers from speaking out, because if you're not going to back me up when I got a gun call, if you're not going to back me up when someone's shooting at me, if you're going to shoot at me and say it was friendly fire, I'm reticent to speak up against you, because I don't want to be in the out group.
You're right. And actually, I read a story about a guy who he actually had to leave the force. His life was railroaded. He was put down. He was prosecuted wrongfully and all of that just because he spoke up. So yeah, it's definitely one of the things that we have to deal with. And I think, yes, the unions should be standing up for their people, and the IRK should be standing up for the people. But I think we need to know what is wrong. Wrong is wrong, no matter
That's
who
right.
is involved. And I think we have to
That's
deal
right.
with that. Yeah. Okay.
Because good and evil cannot occupy the same space at the same time, and no man can
Oh,
serve two masters.
that's right. That's right. Well, we thank you, Dr. Davis, for your time, and we thank you for sharing with us. As I said, we'll definitely be calling you. I know our people are much
Great.
more enlightened, and I hope people will, been given a push to do even more research and see what can be done, because I know with God all things are possible, and so I know we can fix
Absolutely.
this.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank
you,
you
and God
again.
bless.
Thank you. God bless you. Have a great rest of the day. God bless you. God bless
Thank
you.
Turning Point family, what an awesome time we just had. To all our first time guests, we truly appreciate you for joining our live broadcast. We would like to hear from you, so please send us your comments, questions, or testimonies of how this program has impacted your life. Our email address is info@pflmi.org. Finally, if you feel led at any time to give to this ministry, please visit us at pflmi.org and click on the tab for donations. We're looking forward to meeting with you live on next week's program. Have a blessed and prosperous weekend.